Hey everyone, welcome to M2F Story. Today I am going to share with you Brother Will Be My Sister Part 8. We knew that Mum was due home late that morning, so Susan told me to go out and not to return until she'd had a chance to broach the subject of my gender preference with Mum. She suggested that I go into town, so I went for a walk, alone with my thoughts, nervously wandering around for several hours. Eventually I could bear the suspense no longer, and decided that by now, Susan would have had time to talk to Mum and the moment had come for me to put in an appearance. I set off homewards and dragged my steps, fearful of what sort of reception Mum was going to give me. I finally reached the front door and went in. Hearing voices in the lounge, I went in to see Mum sitting on the sofa, while Susan sat in an armchair. Mum smiled at me and I ran across and hugged her. She kissed me on the cheek and I sat down next to her. Suddenly, I could see that she'd been crying, and it wasn't difficult for me to guess why. Susan must have told her about my secret. She looked at me sadly and said, "Susan's been telling me about what you've been up to while I've been away, and for several years it seems when I haven't been looking. Is it true? Do you really like dressing as a girl?" This was the moment of truth, and taking a deep breath, I said, "Yes, I do. Sorry, Mum, but I don't just want to dress as a girl. I want to be one. I always have." "Yes, that's what your sister told me. But why? Do you feel like a girl?" "Not all the time, but most of the time I do. I just feel happy when I'm wearing dresses. It feels so right." Well, I must say this is all a bit of a shock, and I still find it hard to believe. But I have heard of such cases before. And I think the first thing we need to do is establish whether you just want to dress as a girl, or that you actually want to be one, which is quite another matter. Suddenly, I realized that she wasn't mad at me. In fact, quite the opposite. Susan must have done some pretty good explaining, because Mum seemed quite calm about the whole thing. She continued with, "Well, David, all I want is for you to be happy, so this is what we'll do. If you really want to dress as a girl when you're at home, I'm not going to stop you. In fact, I want to see if this is just a passing phase, or whether we really do need to think about something more permanent. So for the time being, you will dress as a girl when you are at home, and you will not dress as a boy again unless I say you can. We'll see how long this is going to last. Perhaps after a few weeks in dresses, you might change your mind." "Some hope of that," I thought confidently. "Now, Susan's told me that you like to think of yourself as an 8-year-old little girl called Lucy. Apparently, you were successfully able to pass yourself off as her over the entire weekend you spent with her friends in Brighton, and she tells me that not one person even suspected you were a boy. That's something I want to see for myself, so tomorrow morning, she's going to dress you up as Lucy and we'll go shopping." I still find it hard to believe that any boy would actually want to go out dressed as a girl. In fact, every other boy I know would regard it as just about the most humiliating experience possible. But if that's what you want, so be it. I'm very curious to see just how well you can pull this off. Then in the afternoon, I've got another test for you. I'm going to take you to tea with Mrs. Norton, a lady I met on holiday, and her 2 daughters. We'll see if you can fool them. I briefly mentioned that I have a son and daughter, but I didn't say what their names were or how old they are, so you can be my daughter Lucy. And unlike Brighton, I think we'd better stick to your real age of 10. If they do discover that you're actually a boy, we'll just say that you're paying a forfeit devised by your sister. I'm sure they'll see the funny side of it, especially the 2 girls. Now that's all I've got to say for the moment about the matter, except to say that I'm sorry you felt you had to hide this from me for so long. I wish you'd told me before, because all I want is what's best for you. I love you very much and will do everything I can to make you happy. Now give me a kiss and I'll make some tea." She put her arms around me and kissed me tenderly on the forehead as if I was a little child. Then she stood up and went out to the kitchen to put the kettle on. I looked at Susan, who smiled and said, "I told you she'd understand, didn't I? Now you can relax and be happy. In the morning, I'll turn you into Lucy, and that will really convince her. I can't wait to see her face when I've transformed you, and I think she'll be more than convinced when she finds Anne Norton and the 2 girls thinking of you as a girl without a second thought. After all the practice you've had by now, this will be a dawdle." I smiled back at her, full of confidence. I still couldn't believe that Mum had been so understanding, and suddenly I was happy again. Mum called us into the kitchen where she'd made some tea and sandwiches and began to tell us all about her holiday. I tried to concentrate, but all I could think about was my forthcoming test the next day. I was determined to convince Mom beyond any doubt that I really did want to be a girl, and I couldn't wait to show her. We spent the afternoon looking at Mom's holiday souvenirs and hearing all about her adventures on her Mediterranean cruise, and she gave Susan some perfume and Moroccan jewelry, while I received a pair of binoculars she'd bought from the ship's duty-free shop. I took them out into the garden immediately and started to survey the neighboring area. They were good quality binoculars, and the image was as clear as crystal. I was delighted with them and ran indoors and hugged Mum. It seemed there was still a little bit of boy left in me. As promised, Mum didn't mention my dressing as a girl again that day, and I sat in the lounge and watched a video until dinner time. After we'd eaten, we sat and watched TV until Mum said it was time for me to be in bed and took me upstairs. She came into my bedroom and looked at my wig on its stand and my Barbie Mac hanging on the door. I opened the wardrobe and she took out some of my dresses and held them up. She smiled and said, "Well, you certainly want to look like a little girl, don't you? These are very pretty. Are they the dresses that Michaela gave you? And some of Susan's old ones as well," I added. "Ah, yes," she said, holding one up. "I remember her wearing this one on her 9th birthday." "Well, come on," she said, hanging it up again. "Let's get you into bed." It was comforting to have Mum home again, and she waited until I'd put my pajamas on and cleaned my teeth before I climbed wearily into bed. She tucked me in and sat on the bed for a moment. She took my hand, smiled, and said, "Now don't you worry about anything, David. Whatever you want, I'll support you, and I know Susan will as well, so you go to sleep now, and we'll see just how good a girl you make tomorrow. I must say I'm curious to see if you look as good as Susan says you do." She kissed me goodnight, switched off the light, and left the door slightly ajar. I was certainly tired, and the lifting of the tension I'd experienced was both tiring and relaxing. I smiled as I thought of how much I was going to enjoy the next day, and I sank into the arms of Morpheus with barely a murmur. Next morning, I was woken by Mum drawing back my curtains. She smiled at me and said, "All right then, lazybones, time to get up. Susan's already up, so do you want her to dress you?" "Yes, please," I said. "I'll just go and take a shower and I'll call down for her when I'm ready to get dressed." "Now that's something I can't wait to see," smiled Mum. "Don't be too long, will you?" She went downstairs and I quickly took a shower and dried off before calling for Susan to come and help me dress. Normally, I wouldn't have needed her help by now, but today I wanted to look perfect. She came into my room, looked at me, and said, "All right, Lucy, today I'm going to turn you into the sweetest little girl in Horsham. We need to really turn it on today if we're going to persuade Mum to go along with all this. Now let's see, which is your cutest dress?" She opened the wardrobe door and worked her way along the row of dresses. Suddenly she stopped and said, "Ah, yes, here we are, this will be perfect." She held it up for my approval, and I grinned and said, "Oh, yes." If that doesn't convince her, nothing will. The dress was certainly a good choice. It was the primrose yellow one and so sweet and demure. It was my favorite. Susan hung it up and took out a white vest and a pair of pale yellow silk knickers. She handed them to me, and I put them on while she took out a white stiffened petticoat from the wardrobe and held it out for me to step into. She pulled it up to my waist before tightening the drawstring and tying it in a bow behind me. Then she took down the dress and held it up for me to put on. I put my arms and head into it, and she drew it down over me before fastening the buttons up the back and carefully tying the sash at the back in a very neat bow. I sat down, and she pulled a pair of childish frilled white ankle socks onto my feet before slipping on a pair of white leather T-bar sandals. She buckled the straps up securely and made sure that my socks were neatly turned down. "Now for your hair," she said. I sat at the dressing table while she fitted the wig onto my head, and then, taking 2 lengths of pale yellow hair ribbon, she tied 2 bows into my hair. She finished off the childish little girl look with 2 white plastic hair slides that she clicked securely in place. "There we are, Lucy," she smiled. "All ready. Now stand up and let's have a look at you." I stood up in front of the full-length wardrobe mirror and smiled with pleasure as I saw the by now familiar figure of Lucy smiling back at me. Susan walked around me, looking me up and down, and said, "Very nice. Lucy, you look absolutely delightful. Now remember everything I've taught you this past month about being a girl, not just looking like one. Do that, and I think we'll convince Mum to let you dress as a girl, at least for the time being." "All right then. Ready?" Ready as I'll ever be. I grinned, my heart beating nervously. Good. Let's go down to breakfast. I led the way downstairs and nervously entered the kitchen. Mum was busy beating some eggs in a bowl, and looked up as I came in. Her face was a picture. She stopped dead, put down the egg whisk, and came round the table to look at me more closely. Turn around, she said, slowly. I did as I was told and could feel her gaze as she closely scrutinized me. After turning a full circle, I stood there in my most demure pose, feet together, hands lightly clasped together in front of me, and with my face turned slightly downward, while I looked up at her with my eyes, trying to look as much like a sweet little girl as I could. Well, Mum, said Susan, what do you think of my little sister Lucy? Mum broke into a smile. Well, frankly, my dear, this was the moment of truth. Frankly, I think he looks absolutely adorable. I'm amazed. I really had no idea just how much like a girl he could look. If I saw him in the street and didn't know him, I wouldn't give him a second glance. He just looks so sweet. She stepped forward and adjusted one of my hair ribbons, stepped back and said, well, I must say I'm impressed by his appearance. It's 100%. Still, let's see how the day goes, shall we? Sure, Mum, said Susan, winking at me. And by the way, would you please remember it's her, not him? This is Lucy, remember. It's important for maintaining the character. Oh yes, of course. Turning to me, Mum smiled and said, all right then, Lucy. Sit down at the table and we'll have some breakfast. And be careful not to spill any food on that pretty dress. It's delightful and rather suits you, I must admit. I grinned with pleasure at this early apparent acceptance of me as Lucy and held great hope for the future. We sat at the table and I remembered everything that my sister had told me about being a girl. I sat up straight and ate my food in small, dainty portions, drinking my tea in little sips. Mum watched me with a look of friendly amusement as we discussed how well our weekend in Brighton had gone, and how happy I'd felt there as Lucy. Breakfast over, I put on my Alice in Wonderland apron, while I helped to do the washing up and put away the breakfast things. All the time, Mum kept looking at me with a bemused smile on her face. She must have found it hard to believe that all this was really happening, and that the little girl helping her was in fact her son, David. All right, she said. Now for our little shopping trip into town. Go upstairs and clean your teeth, Lucy, and then we'll be off. Okay, Mum, I said, and walked daintily up the stairs with Susan to brush my teeth and let her give me a final check over. She looked at me, winked, and said, all right, Lucy, let's go shopping, shall we? We went downstairs and into the hallway, where Mum was putting on her red tartan mackintosh. You'll need your Mac, she said, as she buttoned it up and tightened the belt around her slim waist. It's absolutely pouring. Susan put on her royal blue school gabardine raincoat, and then took down my red rubberized mackintosh and shook it out. As soon as Mum saw it, she said, oh yes, of course, that's the Mac you wore as a little girl. Perfect for Lucy, I'd forgotten we still had it. Here, let me put her into it. It'll be just like I did with you about 10 years ago. She took the mackintosh from Susan, and holding it up for me, she said, here you are, dear, arms in. I slid my arms into the sleeves, and pulling it on over my shoulders, she buttoned it up to the neck and fastened the belt. She stood back and smiled as she said, well, I never thought I'd see that being worn again. It's just like having a younger Susan again. Which gives me an idea. Since you want to try being a little girl, I'm going to treat you just as I did your sister when she was your age. That means I expect you to not only behave as a little girl, but you will do the sort of things she used to do. That means extra housework, among other things. You'll soon find that being a girl may not be as much fun as you seem to think it is. If she thought that would put me off, she had another think coming. Right then, she said. Let's be off. She opened the door, and as we saw the rain pouring down, Mum and Susan put up their raincoat hoods. Mum turned to me, and pulling up my hood, she fastened the button fastening securely under my chin before pulling it forward. She looked at me for a moment, smiled, and said, don't you look sweet peeping out from under that hood? I have to admit, you really do look like a girl. That's it for today. Hope you have enjoyed it. If you do, then be sure to subscribe for the next part of this story.